Thank you, Marina, and good evening, friends. Today we have the third session of this Living Theosophy series that is based on Light on the Path. So far we have explored 16 rules, and the first part consists of 21 rules. So maybe today we can finish the first part of Light on the Path. We'll see. And these books are, as you probably have seen, are not based on giving a lot of information or teachings, but rather pointing out to certain facts of the spiritual life. So rather than trying to go through the book as fast as possible, these books require a deep pondering over what is written. And that's why they are usually very small. And it is said that it has different levels of understanding. We can apply it to different levels of maturity, if we want to say it that way. And something that when at certain point in our life may seem in certain way, then it may change as we grow in our understanding. So the rule number 17, remember these are arranged by 3 rules together and a fourth one that comments upon the 3 previous rules. So let us read 17, 18, and 19 together. It says, seek out the way. Seek the way by retreating within. Seek the way by advancing boldly without. So let us see first the rule, seek out the way. There is a note where it says, this rule seems to be very obvious. I mean, we are studying this, we are striving to tread the spiritual path. Obviously, we are seeking the way, the spiritual way. But the master here says, don't go too fast through this rule, and ask yourself, is it really the spiritual life that we are seeking, or is it the rewards that we expect from leading a spiritual life? Is it that you see that this is the right way to live, regardless of what consequences or results to lead the spiritual life brings? Or is it that you are imagining yourself in a state of, wisdom and power, or whatever we may imagine? So the master says it is very important to have a pure intention. And although we start with some selfish motivations, and that's normal, however, if we are not aware of this, if we don't examine ourselves, then these not so good or not so right motivations may be hidden, and at a certain point they may become a real hindrance. So as we tread the spiritual path, we have to always examine ourselves and become aware of what we are seeking. And in that becoming aware, we can produce a maturity. Now we have to be honest, because, for example, obviously every person wants to be happy. And some people seek it by enjoying what the senses can bring, and food, possessions, or this and that. Some other person may have realized that this pleasure is not permanent, is not deep, and may begin to think, okay, maybe the happiness lies in what we call spirituality, whatever that is. And that's something normal. But if we are still working within the same pattern of thought, within the same pattern of the same attitude, then we are not going to produce a change in ourselves. You know, there is not much difference between seeking happiness by obtaining, you know, physical or psychological possessions, and seeking happiness by obtaining virtues or whatever we want to obtain that we may call spiritual. Because the pattern is the same, is the seeking of happiness from the external world, as an object, something that we have to acquire. When the real happiness is a happiness without object, it's a happiness that is intrinsic in the fact of being what we really are. So when we are treading the spiritual path, if we are doing it as we may follow a career with our idea of obtaining something at the end, we may be working with the same attitude, the same mundane attitude, so to say, and that attitude in itself may become a hindrance to really break through this level of existence where pleasure and pain are constantly alternating each other. So the first thing that we should try to be aware of is this: what am I really seeking? And be honest with yourself, try to see, and then examine if what you are seeking, with your knowledge, with your experience, with what you gather from the study of spiritual literature and your understanding, try to see, is this really going to bring what I think this is going to bring? You know, for example, can I really attain a state of happiness or peace by trying to manipulate the environment or acquire something at the level of the psychological ego, you know? So all this pondering over produces understanding, and this understanding is what dissolves the ignorance, which is the cause of human suffering. So there is the Rule 20 that expands a little on this one and says, seek the way, not by any one road. To each temperament there is one road which seems the most desirable. But the way is not found by devotion alone, by religious contemplation alone, by ardent progress, by self-sacrificing labor, by studious observation of life. None alone can take the disciple more than one step onwards. All the steps are necessary to make up the ladder. So the first idea here is very prominent in Theosophy, and it is that no one single path will take us to the realization of what we are. So there are some traditions that emphasize meditation. If we go through the path of meditation, we can get enlightenment. Or some traditions that emphasize service and charity, or some traditions that emphasize devotion, faith, just believe in and love the deity, and then you will be saved. From the theosophical point of view, all these aspects are necessary to develop in a balanced way. All of these are steps in our progress, and not steps in the sense of a hierarchy, first do this, then do that. But the development has to be holistic. So although some people feel more comfortable with doing one thing or the other, some people are naturally more devotional or more intellectual or more practical, and what it is usually recommended in the theosophical literature is that we should strive to develop all the different areas of our personality. For two reasons. One, because the fact that we cannot approach life from certain point of view. For example, if we reject the intellectual understanding, intellectual in a deeper sense, not merely, verbal or conceptual. Or if we deny the development of love and compassion, or if we deny the need to help others, whatever aspect we are denying, then that becomes a limitation to express what we really are. And the other reason is because in the Theosophical view, to realize what we really are is not only an end in itself. It is an end in itself from a certain point of view, but also the idea is that as the person realizes the truth, also becomes a helper of those who are around, and we all help each other in different ways to realize what the truth is. So a person that has a balanced development can really help humanity in a much better way, because it's easy to be spiritual when we are away from society, when we don't have so many challenges. But for those who are involved in the world, any limitation really is a hindrance to help the world. Some people, we can see it in history. Some people may be very devout people, but if they don't have a deep understanding, they may end up doing foolish things and leading other people to do foolish things. Or the same with any aspect of human nature. So in the idea of the path of discipleship, this relationship with the masters, what the masters need is a person that is as developed as possible in all the different aspects of his own being or her own being, so that it can be a tool to help others with as less hindrances as possible. Obviously, we are all limited. The very fact that we have a form that we are manifested, so to say, is a limitation. But the idea in this particular path is to try to bring those limitations to the minimum possible. So in Theosophy, it is encouraged to tread all the different paths. And then there is the rule, seek the way by retreating within, that we are going to see later, because I think what goes on in this Rule 20, I think that is addressing the Rule 19, seek the way by advancing boldly without. Because it says, the virtues of man are steps indeed, necessary, not by any means to be dispensed with. So it is what we were talking about. It is necessary to develop virtues. The development of virtues have to do with the lower personality. Our real self has all the virtues innate. It's the real self is the origin of any virtue that can exist. So there is nothing like developing virtues at the level of our real self. But the personality, which is the expression of the real self, can be more or less limited. So the idea of developing virtues is the idea of creating as perfect of a vehicle as possible for the real to express through the personality. So it says it is necessary to develop these virtues, yet though they create a fair atmosphere and a happy future, karmically speaking, it generates good karma, they are useless if they stand alone. The whole nature of man must be used wisely by the one who desires to enter the way. I think one of the meanings of this is that just being virtuous, in the forest, is not enough, or is not useful for the rest of humanity at this level where we are talking about. Any change in human consciousness, any realization that a person has, will change the whole human consciousness. And that is something that it's inevitable. But at the same time, if the person is engaged with the world, it can help much more than merely by retreating from the world. Although that may be part of the spiritual development of the person, and I think even in one life in particular, a particular soul may choose a life of retirement. But on the whole, the idea of the path, as Theosophy presents it, is to try to generate people who can help in the world in different ways. Not necessarily being a president or a public figure, but being in the world and influencing those who can be influenced. So the idea is that all these virtues have to be used wisely for he who desires to enter the way. And it says, each person is to himself absolutely the way, the truth, and the life. But he is only so when he grasps his whole individuality firmly, and by the force of his awakened spiritual will, recognizes this individuality as not himself, but that thing which he has with pain created for his own use, and by means of which he purposes, as his growth slowly develops his intelligence, to reach the life beyond individuality. When he knows that for this his wonderful, complex, separated life exists, then indeed, and then only, he is upon the way. So the idea is that we don't have to lose sight of Theosophy proposes two things to keep in mind. One, the ultimate aim, which is to realize the highest in us. But at the same time, we have to work on the lower so that it can be a vehicle for the higher. So there is a danger of becoming focused on the lower and trying to work at the level of the personality and losing sight of the fact that we are not the personality. We are not the individuality. Individuality in the sense of even the higher ego, as it is called in Theosophy. So I think Light on the Path is trying to warn about this. Try not to go to any of the extreme, either to focus exclusively on the higher and forget the lower, or the other way around, to focus on the lower, forgetting that you are not the lower. And it is challenging because it's easier to take any of the...
It's only challenging to the lower.
Yeah. It's challenging to the lower. And that's the idea, that the higher is in itself perfect. So all the work is only at the level of the lower. And as we are going to see in the second part, I think I mentioned something in the last talk. As we advance in the book, more and more we have to learn to let the warrior, which is a real, to fight the battle, and not to be in the way, and not to think that we are the ones that are fighting the battle. But Light on the Path says that is possible after the perception has awakened, after we see, at least to some extent, who we are. And then it is possible to really let the warrior to work. So then the other rule, seek the way by retreating within. There is the Rule 20 says, seek it by plunging into the mysterious and glorious depth of your own inmost being. Seek it by testing all experience, by utilizing the senses in order to understand the growth and meaning of individuality and the beauty and obscurity of those other divine fragments which are struggling side by side with you and form the race to which you belong. Seek it by study of the laws of being and the laws of nature, the laws of the supernatural, and seek it by making the profound obeisance of the soul to the dim star that burns within. Steadily, as you watch and worship, its light will grow stronger. Then you may know you have found the beginning of the way. And when you have found the end, its light will suddenly become the infinite light. So this talks about going within. Talks about plunging into the mysterious and glorious depth of your own inmost being. So this talks about meditation or self-observation or simply silence and looking within. Also talks about, it says, seek it by testing all experience. And there is a note about that. So we are going to see that a little later. Seek it by trying to learn to understand your individuality. Who am I? What is this that I feel I am? You know, it's all this path of self-knowledge. So it's not only that we have to develop virtues, it's not only that we have to try to help in the world, but of course, we have to develop this self-knowledge. Both things are necessary in this view. And it says, try to worship that dim star, that light that is within. And as you do it, it grows stronger and stronger. You know, when we go inside, first we have to try to find this place of silence, a place of silence where there may be thoughts or they may not, but we are beyond the level of the thoughts. And as we find this place of silence, there is a feeling of a presence there, if we want to put it that way. There is a feeling of being, a feeling of purity. And at the beginning it is very dim. Actually, at the beginning it's very difficult to perceive it, but then little by little, as we get more used to dwell in this silence or in this state of observation, we begin to perceive it. And the more we try to dwell in this place, the clearer it becomes to our perception, because we are developing the ability to perceive it. Until one day, it's not a feeling, it's not a sense, but it's a realization of what we really are. And also, this self-knowledge implies to learn about the experiences that we go through. Not in the sense of intellectually learning, but actually seeing what happens. How are we experiencing life? Why do we desire something? Why do we reject something? You know, try to see. That's why it says seek it by testing all experience. And there is a note that says, seek it by testing all experience. And remember that when I say this, I do not say yield to the seductions of sense in order to know it. You know, there is some schools of Tantra, Hindu Tantra mainly, but some Buddhist Tantra also. They say that in order to be able to know, we have to experience. Therefore, we should experience everything that is on earth. There are no good or bad experiences. So although from a philosophical point of view this is correct, then when this is applied without certain sense, certain common sense, as I would call it, then the person engages in all kinds of experiences and things that any person would say are not healthy, because they say, well, this is part of what we have to do. We have to engage in all kinds of experience and know them. So Light on the Path, I think, is referring to that particular view and says, remember that by testing all experience, I'm not saying yield to the seductions of the sense in order to know it. So it goes on saying, yet you can experience whatever you are going through without horror. You can weigh, observe, and test them, and wait with the patience of confidence for the hour when they shall affect you no longer. This is also a characteristic of Light on the Path. Light on the Path don't talk much about fighting against the lower nature. It talks about learning and becoming aware of the lower nature. You will see that, I think it's in the last rule, in this part, Light on the Path says, there is no cure for desire, no cure for disappointment, no cure for any of these things, except by trying to perceive the eternal, by living in the eternal. That means nothing you can do actually will uproot the cause of suffering. What will do it is to understand it and to go beyond. So it's not through actions primarily, but through understanding. So that's why Light on the Path says, if you are going through an experience that you don't like, or even if you have a tendency that you don't like, it says you can experience it without horror, trying to learn from it. And it says you can weigh it, observe it, test it, and wait with the patience of confidence for the hour when they shall affect you no longer. So the idea is that as we go through the experiences and we try to understand, to become aware, to see, to realize, the time will come when that experience will not affect us anymore. But we have to do this work. We have to do this work of learning, becoming aware. And by learning, I don't mean to develop concepts about what is going on. I mean, it may happen, that's fine. But by learning, I mean seeing, discovering, see why you are attracted to something, or if you are in pain, or if you have an unfulfilled desire. Try to look at it and ask yourself, why do you want that? And try to see what part of yourself wants it, or whatever you can do. I'm just putting some examples. If we do this earnestly, even if we don't arrive to any answer, that's why I say by learning, I don't mean to arrive to a concept. Even if we don't arrive to any answer, by trying to do this, we are maturing that aspect of ourselves. And at some point, the time will come when that doesn't affect us anymore. We didn't do anything directly to correct it. But we did something very important, which is to throw light on that dark spot. I think Ed wants to say something.
So this observation is similar to being an apprentice to a master. Mm-hmm. It's not. It's sort of like you watch very intently what the cook is doing, how he does it, his demeanor, his approach, the sort of the whole picture, and through the observation, you take on the knowledge of what he is as a cook. So you apply the same thing to your own motivations, your own actions, your own thoughts, and you just observe, you know, how it is you go about your day-to-day living and what the results are. Not with the intent of changing, not with the intent of getting better, but just in seeing, you know, what is happening, you become more effective.
Yes, I usually say, you know, we are our own laboratory, but I don't know if that is meaningful for people. I mean, I like science, and my background is in science, and to me this is very meaningful. May not be as meaningful to other people, but actually we are, you know, our personality is our field of research, of trying to learn, what life is about, how we experience things. And by doing that is that we really can develop virtues. Again, not with the intent, that's what Light on the Path said at the beginning of these rules. Seek out the way, not the result. If you are trying to do this because you want to acquire something, then you are working in the same, with the same pattern. Diane wants to say something.
What I'm thinking is developing certain insights. There's no cure-all because, as you said, the desire always will be, but it's the insights that we develop through whatever comes forward, whatever comes to the surface. We're not doing everything, but whatever insights. We also teach one another because since we're not in the same place, each one of us is evolved in a different stage. So that's when we can teach one another also.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where we are at. What matters is all we can learn is what we are experiencing. So what we are experiencing is what we are. So it doesn't matter, relatively speaking, when comparing to others, you know, where we are.
Well, I just wanted to add another part to this. Within us, we have various parts that may be warring with each other or supporting each other, protecting the others, or, you know, criticizing, or all these different aspects of ourselves. And becoming aware of those, I think, that's the way I'm thinking of what you just said about us being a laboratory, that we can be aware there's a centralized core that manages all that within us, and learning or being aware of how, you know, to best serve all those parts and still stay centered in your core seems to be the trick.
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, all this practice is transformed as we are transformed. Because at the beginning there is an entity doing all this work actively, you know, trying to see, trying to learn this and that. But as we go on in that direction, that entity begins to dissolve, in a sense. And eventually, that develops as a solid or unified state of awareness where whatever happens inside, there is an awareness of that. And there is not so much an entity looking for this or that, because actually we are none of those entities that you mentioned, which are within us, so to say, and we are none of them. But at the beginning, there is an entity or one of those many entities that begins this work on itself, you know, and that entity will dissolve itself also. And also in different aspects of our lives, when there is something that is really bothering us, that is something that we cannot take naturally and let go of it, then that shows that there is a lack of understanding there. So it is well to put our attention especially in that area and let this awareness to throw light on all the dark corners. Then when that area of our life becomes clear, then the entity that was trying to purify it also disappears, in a sense, so to say. So as there is more order in our consciousness, this entity that is trying to put order also disappears. But something that is essential to be able to do this is, as Light on the Path says here, you can experience them without horror. If we are going to research, to see, to realize what is inside, we have to be able to do it to see things without an emotional reaction to that. We have to be able to see the dark corners that are there, which are not ours any more than anybody else's. If there is in us a feeling of guilt or that we are not able to, or this or that, all those things will be a hindrance to see what is really going on there. I think one of the main obstacles for this is that inability to see things as they are without feeling, without feeling any sense of guilt or denigration, you say that, or whatever feeling like that. We have to be able to see things as they are without being affected by it. And then it talks, to finish with this rule, it talks about these dark areas of the personality. It says, when you have found the beginning of the way, the star of your soul will show its light, and by that light you will perceive how great is the darkness in which it burns. Mind, heart, brain are all obscure and dark until the first great battle has been won. Be not appalled and terrified by the sight. Keep your eyes fixed on the small light and it will grow. But let the darkness within help you to understand the helplessness of those who have seen no light, whose souls are in profound gloom. Blame them not, shrink not from them, but try to lift a little of the heavy karma of the world. Give your aid to the few strong hands that hold back the powers of darkness from obtaining a complete victory. Then do you enter into a partnership of joy, which brings indeed terrible toil and profound sadness, but also a great and ever-increasing delight. So I think the last idea here is that as we see the darkness inside, as we see, our weaknesses or our lack of understanding or our conflicts, that should be a reminder that each one of us are, from a certain point of view, fighting our own demons. Each person is trying to find a way to whatever is truth. And some people may be closer to a way that is effective, and some people may be further away, but we are all trying to do that, consciously or unconsciously. And as we see how difficult this is, that may help us develop compassion for those who don't even have the benefit of a worldview that may encourage you to do this. Some people, they are with a worldview that is encouraging, all the most personal aspects. And it is harder, even harder for them to be able to transcend, all these reactions, all these things that we consider or regard as wrong. So that's more or less the idea that these 3 or 4 rules are giving us. The path of self-knowledge and trying to seek the way, and this self-knowledge as a way to produce the right tool or instrument to help humanity. So I don't know if there is any question there on the internet or here, or comment.
I'm not sure. Did it cover the idea of advancing boldly without?
Well, that's what I said. I don't think the notes or the comments cover that. I think one hint that I think is there is this idea of, because if you say seek out the way and seek it by retreating within, then it looks like encouraging the idea of retiring from the world. And that in the Theosophical literature, usually, there is an active warning about that path in particular. So I think that rule, it's probably to balance the idea of retreating from the world. And when it talks about developing virtues and just having virtues but not using them to help, humanity, I think that's also part of seek out the way, advancing outside, in a sense. But I have also my thoughts about what this means. When we see the kind of spiritual people, let me say something first. Many times in Theosophical leaders have said that the mystic path and the occult path are different in the ways. The end is the same, but they are 2 different paths. And the mystic many times is more, not always, there have been some mystics that were really active and reformers of the world, but most mystics tend to be more teachers than reformers, so to say. In the occult path, many of the occultists tend also to be reformers, tend to be people that try to change the world, not only to teach spirituality, but also to engage in the world and change it, not necessarily the world at large, at least in their own circles. So you will see that many occultists have lives that are in turmoil or with people criticizing and some attacking, other, defending, because they stir up the environment where they are at. So maybe that's one of the meanings of seek out the way by boldly, advancing without, not just try to be a nice, spiritual teacher and be nice to everybody. Of course, we have to try to, but it's easier if we are just, without engaging in the world. But the idea is go to the world, do whatever you can, try to do it the best you can, but do something in the world. And it's a general rule, not every person that is on the occult path is a reformer, and not every mystic is a teacher, if we want to use those stereotypes. So that would be my take on this, but it's just my thoughts.
Any other comments or questions? And anything from the world at large? No? Okay.
And let me also say something. We have a few more minutes.
You covered 21?
No. I got to number 20. I don't know if 21 is kind of long. Well, we can start. We have 10 more minutes. I think we could start with 21 and see where we can get to. So this 21 is the last rule of the first part, and it says, "Look for the flower to bloom in the silence that follows the storm, not till then. It shall grow, it will shoot up, it will make branches and leaves and form buds while the storm continues, while the battle lasts, but not till the whole personality of the person is dissolved and melted, not until it is held by the divine fragment which has created it, as a mere subject for grave experiment and experience, not until the whole nature has yielded and become subject unto its higher self, can the bloom open." So first it is talking about this flower to bloom. It will say what the flower means. We will read it shortly. But the idea is that the bloom of this flower is not going to happen during the fever of the battle, so to say. During this, there is a stage where we are learning, we are becoming aware of what we are and what we are not. And this very intention of discovering what we are is calling up all the latent tendencies that are in ourselves that become dormant, but when we are earnest and try to really, see deep what we are awakening all these tendencies. So as we are saying, the spiritual life produces this kind of turmoil in a sense. Also, it brings other, things that are what we could call beneficial. I don't like to talk so much about that aspect because today the spiritual life is usually advertised as a source of peace and love and this and that, which is true in the long run. But before we can really realize what we are, which is love, compassion, wisdom, peace, we have to face what we are not. So that facing what we are not is not necessarily easy. It depends also on each person, the karma of the person at the time. But generally speaking, it's not necessarily easy. And we shouldn't be discouraged when we see that, since I'm trying to be spiritual, I seem to be worse than before. That's something so typical that many people say. So, but during this whole storm, there is something that is being developed. And when the storm is over, then there is the blooming of the flower. And it says, "Then will come a calm, such as comes in a tropical country after the heavy rain, when nature works so swiftly that one may see her action. Such a calm will come from the harassed spirit, and in the deep silence the mysterious event will occur, which will prove that the way has been found. Call it by what name you will. It is a voice that speaks where there is none to speak. It is a messenger that comes, a messenger without form or substance. Or it is a flower of the soul that has opened. It cannot be described by any metaphor, but it can be felt after, looked for, and desired, even amid the ragings of the storm. The silence may last a moment of time, or it may last 1,000 years, but it will end. Yet you will carry its strength with you. Again and again the battle must be fought and won. It is only for an interval that nature can be still." And the note says, "The opening of the bloom is the glorious moment when perception awakes. With it comes confidence, knowledge, certainty. The pause of the soul is the moment of wonder, and the next moment of satisfaction, that is the silence. So the idea is that after all this struggle, there comes a moment of peace where we realize, where we reap the fruit of that struggle. And that is the realization that is brought by all our work. That perception which may show us the truth in whatever we were working at. And I think the idea why Light on the Path is describing this is to encourage us to keep going, even though we are in the midst of the storm and we cannot see. You know, when we are going through a difficult time, we don't know what to do. We don't know what is going on. We don't know, what our attitude should be, because we are in the midst of the storm. And we cannot expect at that time to really see. All we can do is to try to understand, to watch the storm, to watch our reactions, and trust that after that process is over, then the perception will come. Then we will realize how things are. But meanwhile, we have to keep going with confidence. So then there is a whole description of when this happens at a certain level. After that, it says the disciple enters into the hall of learning, where the disciple can meet the master, or the aspirant can meet the master and become a disciple. And that's more or less what Light on the Path says in the other, because what follows is more related to the disciple meeting the master. It says, when the disciple is ready to learn, then he is accepted, acknowledged, recognized. It must be so, for he has lit his lamp, and it cannot be hidden. But to learn is impossible until the first great battle has been won. So the idea is that the disciple can only meet the master when he can learn. We think that we all can learn, but the learning is not at the intellectual level. The learning means to learn from life. You know, if we think of learning as somebody coming and giving us information, that's very easy to do. Now learning means to see what we don't like to see, to face what we don't like to face, to learn from the suffering that we go through life, also from the joyful moments, but that's easy to do. My point is that to be able to learn is to be completely open to learn from whatever is happening, is to have put down the self-defense that the psychological ego develops. So when we transcend that state or those reactions, when we saw what we are to a level where that allows us to let go of the lower self to a certain extent, then only we can learn at the level of the relationship of master and disciple. Then only we can learn from life. And then only the master is found. So that's how Light on the Path ends. And then the second part is more related to a person who is already a disciple, but can be related to our life in even to the life of anybody in many other levels. So for the next meeting, which is the last one, I will select some parts in the second part that I think can be applicable to our lives.